Let's begin.
Hello and welcome to Pods Above Replacement, part of the Padres Hot Tub Podcast Network. My name is Raphie Cantor. I am a host and producer of Padres Hot Tub, and joining me from the Mile High City, he's got that new dad strength and he's throwing 103 miles per hour. It's John Fracoda.
If I make any mistakes for a few weeks now, you can't blame it on me. Gavin Sheets and I are going through it. That's just what happens when you have a new child.
It seems like it's a nice little time on Paternity List Island. I hope you guys had a nice little vacation together. John, it's good to see you. Obviously, it's been quite some time. You've been busy. I've been busy. But we had to get back into the lab to talk about what our madman of a general manager and president of baseball ops, AJ Preller, did last week during the course of the 2025 trade deadline. So we're going to break it all down for you in just a little bit. We're also going to be doing this in a kind of a different fashion. There was so much flurry and activity that happened on Thursday that we're actually going to break this down into 3 separate episodes, just so that we can go a little bit more in depth, break things down. You guys can take a little bit of a breather as we go through these things as well. But before we get into any of the trades, John, it's been some time since you've been on mic talking about the Padres. How do you feel about this team right now? How do you feel about the organization?
So those are wildly different questions, right? So we
just
made
exactly.
a bunch of we just made a bunch of trades. I feel like it's impossible not to be excited about at least this next half of the season. And if you're not excited about the next half of the season, you need to work on your staying in the moment type things, because even if you are down on the on like the organization as a whole, which I think is a fair assessment, if you think that all these trades were poor trades and we gave up too much value, that's a fair assessment. And when something good is about to happen, that doesn't mean you throw away the baby with the bathwater, right? You at least are entitled to enjoy the rest of this season, even if you think the trades were poor. But yeah, that doesn't necessarily mean that one should think all the trades were poor.
So you've talked in the past about this concept of the prospect credit card, and that eventually the bill is going to come due for the Padres. And I certainly love that analogy and continue to love that analogy. I also think that the Padres have seemingly been able to, I don't know if they're doing like a credit balance transfer onto like an Amex that's like has a point system or something they're taking advantage of, but they seem to keep getting away with it for now. Do you think that prospect credit card bill is going to come due soon in a big way, or is AJ Preller just that special?
Every once in a while I'll have a patient who has no home and no job, and somehow they're addicted to drugs, and you're like, how do you pay for these drugs when you have no assets? And I think what it is desperation will get you there, and somehow, some way, AJ Preller is desperate enough to get a star. I don't know how he does it. He'll trade everything in the cupboard just to get that star, and it keeps working. You would think that eventually things are going to fall off, but I don't know. He's good enough at getting these single A and lower guys with just enough of a tantalizing talent that people are like, well, he is the Padres' 4th best prospect, and he does throw 98. So, it's reasonable to trade this guy for X player or Y player. I don't know. I think that he has some kind of talent at justifying a trade, and that pump and dump thing for him, I think, is real.
It's very real, and I think from my armchair expert, non-professional opinion on all of this, like, it does seem to me that AJ's real market inefficiency that he's taking advantage of is that he's just completely emotionally unattached to any of these guys. I think a lot of general managers, they take a lot of pride in the players that they draft, and they scout, and they go to the Dominican, and they like look into them, and then they hug. They hug. And AJ again is like, oh, I can get a catcher with a 700 OPS with 4.5 years of control. Like, fuck it. Like, you guys are out of here. I don't care. So I'm wondering if that rings true for you, John, or if you think that is ultimately going to be AJ's Achilles heel at some point.
Well, he's a good. They say that the best managers are good old fashioned sociopaths, and you're basically saying that AJ Preller is a good old fashioned sociopath. He has no connections. He's just willing to do whatever it takes. I mean, it's there's so many layers to this because he is kind of one of a kind, right? There's not anybody else that wheels and deals quite in the same manner. I mean, Dombrowski's the closest, and he even has like a very specific thing where he'll trade prospects, usually younger prospects, for current players. But AJ's doing all the kinds of trades. He's doing, lateral moves. He's doing vertical moves. He'll trade young guys. He'll trade old guys. He'll trade established players. He just does it all. And so he's different. I will say that the one thing that I wanted to bring up about his strategy in particular, because it is so isolated, there's not quite anybody else that does what he does, is that, I mean, he's had conversations this trade deadline probably with every single team, but at least with the Astros in depth, at least with the Red Sox in depth, at least with the Twins in depth, and that's just among teams that he didn't trade with. Obviously, he had in-depth talks with all these teams that he did make trades with. And when he makes all those queries on these players, and they start discussing players and transactions, what he always gets, I'm sure, is a thorough understanding of what the other GM values in his system. And when you start having all these these value assessments of your players constantly, then you are getting this information on what you can do in the next trade market, in the next offseason. And so I feel like he, more than any other GM, has an internal knowledge of what his assets are actually worth on the market. And that's valuable if you want to make trades, and I think that he just keeps using that information.
Well, I think that that's a great springboard for us to launch into the first trade. So this is the trade we will be coming in this first episode of Pods Above Replacement. And it's the big one. It's the marquee one. It's the first one that came across the wire roughly around the 8 o'clock hour Pacific time on trade deadline day. And it was, it absolutely floored me when I saw it come across my phone, which was that the Padres were trading for right-handed flamethrower, probably best reliever in baseball and pure stuff alone, Mason Miller, and also getting JP Sears, the lefty from the erstwhile Oakland, now Sacramento, soon to be Las Vegas Athletics. But in return, they gave up 4 prospects, 3 pitching prospects, but of course the big marquee name being shortstop Leo De Vries, who, depending on who you ask, I think most outlets had pegged as the Padres' best prospect. I think most outlets had pegged as at least a top 20, if not top 10 prospect. I think MLB Pipeline has him as number 3 overall. And, I think he was the number 1 international prospect in the class after the Padres got Ethan Salas, who was the number 1 international prospect the year prior. And really, I think a lot of people saw as the future shortstop of this organization at one point. So, I mean, there's so much to unpack with this. John, where do you want to start?
Let's start with the players that are not Leo De Vries, and then go into Leo De Vries, because Leo is going to be the argument point. But before I even get started on those players, I want to know, so you saw this trade happen, right? When you saw this trade happen, and you saw that we were getting Mason Miller, if you had to put a percentage in your mind that Suarez was gone, what percentage would you say that was?
75%.
That's exactly the number I was going to pick. 75%.
Yeah.
Yep, me too.
I was almost, maybe 80. I was excited by it, to be honest, because, I mean, I don't want to spike some of our stuff, but just, I think Robert Suarez is the 4th or 5th best reliever in the bullpen now.
Yeah.
I think it's him and Estrada are sort of neck and neck. I'd probably put him above Estrada. Maybe that's recency bias because we're recording this on Sunday the 3rd, and Estrada gave up 2 runs last night in the game. Yeah. I mean, to think that they could have gotten an outfielder potentially to plug the hole that they were, needing to plug still. Anyway, yeah, please continue, John.
All right, so let's just go in. I also thought, by the way, that Suarez was long gone. Let's just go into the prospects. So, Braden Nett, I feel like Braden Nett was this year's Estuary Ruiz, or I feel like every year we have this like guy that I've never heard of before the season, and then everybody's saying that we got to hold on to no matter what, and then we trade him. So Braden Nett was going to be he was going to be the next year's, probably makes it into the rotation at some point in the year. He's 23 right now. He was a number 9 prospect according to Fangraphs because he had a fastball that sat 94 to 98 and topped out at 100, with some mediocre breaking pitches and off-speed pitches to go with it. Longenhagen said that it took him a while to become a viable strike thrower, and so yeah, he was walking like over 5 batters per 9 innings until this year. This was the first year that he was down below that, and he's still at 4. So it's a question of in these 74 innings that he was pitching at Double-A, he was able to walk only 4 batters per 9 innings, which is still a lot. And you know, when you have a guy that has trouble with control, and the first time that he ever does it is for 74 innings, there's a good question of whether he can actually, you know, keep throwing strikes, if this is real or if it's not real. And if it is real, he's probably a good, you know, solid pitcher at the back of your rotation, maybe even better than that if he develops his off-speed pitches better. And if he can't, then he's, what was that do you remember, was it Pareda? That White Sox pitcher who we got in the Jake Peavy trade, and everybody said he was going to be good. He was this lefty. I think it was Aaron Pareda. That might be wrong, but
oh my god, I'll vamp and keep going, and I'll confirm.
But it was the same thing where like he was a guy that had nasty stuff but couldn't throw strikes, and then he threw strikes. I think the year that we tried to trade for him, and then he never threw strikes again. And I don't even think he made it to the Padres. If he did, it was just for a cup of coffee. But that's kind of the situation here. There's definitely upside here. It makes sense that the A's would want him, and there's downside. If this guy can't throw a strike, then he's definitely a relief pitcher.
It was indeed Aaron Pareda, by the way. There were 4 players coming back to the Padres. Can you name any of the other 4? There's one guy you do know, for sure.
Clay Rich.
Yep, there you go.
Clayton Richard.
Clayton Richard, Aaron Pareda, and then there's 2.
There was some flamethrower that was right-handed. He was a bullpen pitcher. There was... Shoot, I don't remember his name. No, I'm lost on the other 2. I could eventually pull it out, I'm sure, but it would take too long on a podcast.
The other 2 players are Adam Russell and Dexter Carter.
Yeah, Dexter Carter was the one I was thinking of. Or wait, no, yeah, I think so. Okay. But anyways, there's a chance that Net is the Aaron Pareda of this trade. Going up next, Henry Baez is a 23-year-old who is like the antithesis of somebody that AJ Preller would like. He is a strike-throwing righty with the stuff of a depth starter. So he throws like low to mid 90s. His K rate is already in Double-A below 9. You know, he had a 196 ERA with, you know, peripherals that say he wasn't throwing that well. So he is something that we need often, like many years. We need somebody who will be the 7th, 8th starter, and you know, Kolek was that this year for us when we don't have to go digging into like the bullpen or for Rich Hill to, you know, get the last few innings. Probably that's what Baez is. Not my favorite Padres prospect. That being said, probably useful guy, especially when we're trading like all of our depth options like we did this trading deadline. But I totally understand not being high on him and being willing to give this guy away. And then the last guy that's not Leo De Vries is the Nunez guy. I don't remember how to pronounce it. Eduardo, I believe. Nunez, that we saw him for a second for 4 2/3 innings in the majors, and he's the guy with a bunch of stuff and also no command. He was a minor league signing, I think, this offseason, so that was, you know, making something out of nothing, basically. It's funny, the Longenhagen like quote on him was from a few months ago, but it totally makes sense, and that's that while he has the late inning stuff, which we saw he does, he can't repeat his delivery. He lacks mechanical fluidity, and his release is all over the place, which like totally sounds like the unathletic wind up that it doesn't have repeatability that AJ Preller would just hate. But the stuff that he would love, so he's probably like ambivalent on him overall. I don't know, minor league signing with great stuff, and probably will walk too many people to be a great pitcher unless you get I mean, how old is he? He's already 26 years old and he can't repeat
He's
his delivery.
26.
Yeah, 26-year-old who can't repeat their delivery is not super exciting. But, you know, this is the kind of guy that I would love if we were in, like, 2016 Padres where, like, we don't have much on the horizon, but we're like, maybe this guy could be a closer, and maybe he can for a team like the A's.
Yeah. I mean, he's got this sort of winnowy quality to him as well. He's 6'2", but he's only 170. And he doesn't, you know, he doesn't have that kind of muscle buildup, and like when you get to this point in your career, if you're not able to repeat the mechanics of your delivery, that's death to major league pitchers because the hitters are simply just too good. Like they'll pick up on it. Like it's they don't even realize that they're picking up on it. Their instincts are so good. So my question before we start talking about Leo, these three guys, Net, Baez, Nunez, are you going to miss any of them?
Yeah, Net. Just because I like to have that, you know, guy that you can have in the minor leagues that you can bring up and not have to get Rich Hill when I mean, how close were we to running out of pitchers this year? We were very close, and we got lucky that it ended up being like Bergert was fine, Kolek was fine. Somehow, some way, Vasquez has survived. I have no idea how, but somehow that worked out. It felt like we were on a precipice and we almost fell over, and we didn't. We just like stood right on the edge. And, you know, Net's the guy that would keep you from falling over the edge probably next year.
Yeah. So let's talk about Leo. So do you want to do a little cue up on Leo, and then we can talk about the future war and all that stuff?
Yeah, so, I mean, Padres fans know this dude well. It's a question of what you think he is. And I feel like there's two camps, kind of. There's the camp that thinks that this is a future, like, great hitter who sticks at shortstop and therefore is a franchise-altering player. And the people that rank him third overall, like MLB prospectus, that's who they think that they are. And then there's most people are slightly behind that, and then there's Eric Longenhagen, who's on the very far end and has him rated below Salas, mostly because he thinks that he needs to gain muscle strength in order to be a valuable hitter. But then if he gains muscle strength, you have to move him off shortstop. And now you have to hit like either a second baseman or a third baseman if he gains a lot of muscle mass. And now it's like, can he hit enough to be a third baseman? Where his ceiling would be Ketel Marte, but his floor is just a, you know, pretty good hitting third baseman. And if that's the case, if he is moved off the shortstop position, it's going to be harder for him to be a valuable hitter. I mean, he's 18, so you're basically making wild guesses right now about what he would be at the major league level. He's, I think, like 4 years younger or something crazy than his average player at the same level as he is. So he has a lot of time to develop. That being said, does he have holes? I don't know. You normally find that out in like AA. So I understand getting people excited about a player and then trading that player, and he could be franchise altering. So it depends on your level of risk about how much you like De Vries.
Yeah, something you talked about before we hit recording is prospect evaluation has gotten better over the years. So, you know, the idea that there's a pretty wide consensus that he's going to be an impact player for whichever organization he shows up for, I think you could probably bank on that in some way. I think that the error bars that you laid out are pretty significant in terms of the future impact of this trade, because you know, we haven't gotten to the A side of things yet, but Mason Miller is really good. Like he's just really good, and like that's basically like we're gonna talk about it a little bit more in depth than that, but like that's gonna be like our top line is like, look, this guy throws harder than anyone else, and if his arm doesn't fall off, he's gonna continue to be incredible. And sort of what you were talking about with Leo is like, yeah, if he hits 30 home runs a year as a switch hitter playing shortstop, that stings. Like that is a franchise altering player. You can't like polish that turd. But if, you know, if he doesn't build up the muscle, or if he does build up the muscle and is a negative defender or whatever, and like, yes, he's still a power hitter, and like how many 30 to 40 home run guys are there out there? Really not a lot. It's still going to hurt. But I did just want to, as we transition now to talking about kind of the future WAR breakdown, which if you're not familiar with the concept of future WAR, John and I have plenty of episodes where we talk about it. You can go and listen to our trade breakdown we did of the Juan Soto trade. You can listen to, and then the second Juan Soto trade. Like, we talk about it quite a bit there. But basically, the idea is when teams are evaluating making these trades, they assign dollar values and therefore sort of WAR values to prospects. And the thing to really know about it is that present WAR is more valuable than future WAR. So production that you are getting today in 2025 is more valuable than production you're getting in 2028. And there are plenty of different talent evaluators who have their own formulas of like how much they think. Like they even go into like, we think that, like, I know for Fangraphs, they basically have a exponential decay of 93% year over year. So and that's what I use for my future WAR calculation. So basically meaning that, like, 2026 WAR is worth 93% of 2025 WAR. And 2027 WAR is worth 93% squared of 25 WAR. You know what I mean? So it's like, you can really get technical with it if you want. And there's an article, I think Longenhagen wrote this one, but it's back from 2018, where they basically assigned WAR values to different tiers of prospects. And if you're watching this, which we should say, we hope you're watching the video of this. It's going to be on YouTube, or if you're a patron, it might be on Patreon if I can get the upload. Sometimes the upload system is a little finicky on there. But we have a chart on screen now that will show you kind of how Fangraphs values top 100 prospects. And I think something that's super important to note, you can see on the different 60 position player future value, 55 position player future value tiers, is that the bust rate for these guys is really still quite high. And by bust rate, we mean they put up fewer than one WAR in their career. So for 60 future value players, back when this was written in 2018, the bust rate was 31.8%. For 55 future value players, the bust rate was 36.5%. For 50 future value position players, the bust rate was over half, 51.5%. Okay, obviously, talent evaluation has gotten better since then. I suspect that those bust rates now will be a little bit smaller. But one thing that Leo has going against him compared to some of these other prospects that are evaluated is that he's 18 years old. He's super young, and that creates larger error bars. And so, yes, maybe Leo's ceiling is higher than we can even imagine right now, but also his floor could be lower. So it's important to keep that in mind. So as we talk about future WAR, I'm going to just go ahead and give you the breakdown as I have calculated it, and then we can kind of talk about why that calculation works and doesn't work. So Mason Miller, according to Zips, is projected to put up about a one WAR every year of his deal. So for 4.5 seasons of control, that's 4.5 F4 projected. And that would be 3.9 future WAR with the decaying returns, as I said. The reason that that's imperfect is that WAR for relievers is typically calculated by how many leverage innings that they throw. And by way of the fact that he was playing for the Athletics, Mason Miller was not throwing as many leverage innings as he will with the Padres. So I would say that WAR calculation is probably lower than it actually will end up being, because these projections were run at the beginning of the season. But just top level with that number, John, how does that strike you?
Whenever you do this, it's like relatively close, the total value in the exchange, and so it feels like all the GMs are operating off something that's relatively similar to the thing that you're basically operating off of. I will say, just like you said, the how high the leverage of the situation is dictates how valuable a relief pitcher is. The numbers for Mason Miller in terms of future WAR are like barely higher than JP Sears, and I feel like our intuition tells us that is just not true. Like his likelihood of, even if he just stays in as a reliever, the likelihood of him being a valuable commodity worth more than one WAR. I mean, one win, one blown save that turns into a loss compared to, like JP Sears is not close. So I would say that kind of like defense, relief value is tough to judge. And so I'm sure that there's some folks out there who value it more. And I think that AJ Preller has very clearly declared himself to be somebody who values relief pitching more than the average GM, especially in years that he thinks that he's going to make it to the playoffs, because he's seen relievers, turnover value in the playoffs at a higher rate, because in the playoffs you can only use your top maybe 10 pitchers that you're using, and so their value versus somebody that you're not going to use, like a probable JP Sears, is exponentially more valuable if your goal is to win a championship, which should be AJ Preller's goal.
Yeah, and just so folks get sort of reference of like what is a incredible reliever season look like, and how does that grade out in terms of F4. Last year with the Athletics, Mason Miller pitched 65 innings. During those 65 innings, he had a 2.18 FIP. That FIP was carried by a 14.4 strikeouts per nine rate. He was walking guys just under 3 per 9, and he gave up homers at a 0.83 per 9 clip. And he threw 65 innings, and that equated to 2.3 WAR, 2.3 F4. That's probably a 90th percentile outcome for any reliever. I mean, certainly, and even for Mason Miller. I mean, it's hard to imagine it getting that much better than that. And so if you think maybe 2.5 F4 is like the 100th percentile outcome of what a reliever can offer you, it's hard to imagine a reliever pushing 3 F4.
Dude, Suarez already has 1.7 F4 this year, and like I feel like most of us kind of shit on Suarez overall, but like because he is getting all those leverage innings, it boosts your F4. The whole calculation seems a little bit like, I don't know, imperfect.
It's a little imperfect. But because I haven't even just laid out what the whole future WAR calculation is, so I have Mason Miller at 4.5 total F4 projected, 3.9 F future WAR. I have JP Sears at 2.7 F4 projected, 2.4 future WAR. So in future WAR, that grades out to 6.3 that the Padres are receiving. And for the Athletics, it's entirely dependent on how good you think Leo De Vries is. So I didn't even calculate Leo De Vries as a 50 future value player, because literally Eric Lonkenhagen is the only evaluator who thinks that, and I think it's a little silly because it obviously...
Just by reference, that same guy almost ranked Berger as a 50. So he was basically said he was a change up away from being the same value tier as Leo De Vries, which seems insane to me.
It's insane, and I just frankly don't agree with it. And in the latest write-up they did, he was like, he's about as close to a 55 future value as a 50 future value prospect could be, which I'm like, okay, fuck off. So let's say you value him as either a 55 or 60 future value player, as most outlets do. That puts his future WAR calculation at 5.1 or 6.1, which again I think gives you a idea of how wide the error bars are on these guys, because you don't think of giving up 6.1 future WAR in a deal and think that that's going to be a franchise altering number, but that's because you're factoring in a 30-ish 32% bust rate on these guys who don't put up any, and so 6.1 is an average number for guys who are graded out at 60 future value, and the rest of the guys, Braden Nett, Henry Baez, Eduardo Nunez, I mean, they're, Net's the only one that grates out above 0.1 future WAR. He puts up 0.3 future WAR as a 40-plus future value pitcher. Really, the thought process behind that is just there's no such thing as a pitching prospect. The error bars are massively wide, because at any point, any of their elbows could explode. And when you're not graded out at like a Mackenzie Gore level evaluation as a prospect, it's just really hard to... there's so many of these guys who average out to nothing that it just kind of drags the valuation down. So depending on how you see Leo De Vries, the Athletics are either receiving 5.6 or 6.6 total future WAR. That's again against the Padres receiving 6.3. So again, I don't know if the system is perfect. I think especially with relievers, it doesn't really work. And also, we're going to talk about JP Sears. I think JP Sears is going to be a much better player for the Padres than that. But the numbers are somewhat close. So you can kind of see if they use something similar to this, how they get to this number, John.
So if you don't like this trade, I feel like there's two people who don't like the trade. There's one person that says we gave up way too much. And that's if you are more accepting of risk, I feel like you're that person because you're like this. Because Leo De Vries could be a very average, below average player even, but he could also be a star. So if you're the person that just likes to hunt risk, then you probably think that we gave up too much. If you're a conservative person about prospects, then you probably don't. But there's another person that I think is a more fair argument, which is we gave up a fair amount for this player, Mason Miller. But why the hell did we go after Mason Miller rather than a different, like a position player or a starting pitcher or somebody else that has equal value to Mason Miller but would help the team more, a catcher? Let's get into Mason Miller, I think, and then we can have that debate after we talk about Mason Miller, which should be pretty short, I think.
Yeah. So for folks who don't know Mason Miller, he was drafted by the Athletics in 2021. He was a third-round pick, 97th overall. He was a college signee. He went to Gardner-Webb University. John, do you know what the mascot of Gardner-Webb University is?
I've seen them before, probably college basketball. Is it like a spider or something?
It is not a spider. It is a mammal.
That narrows it down to, mammals among logos. You know how unlikely those are. So.
Yeah.
No, I've no.
It is the. Did you want to guess or should I just tell you?
So it's Gardner-Webb in North Carolina. Is that what it was said?
Gardner-Webb is in It is in Boiling Springs, North Carolina.
So a mammal in North Carolina. What kind of mammals do they have in North Carolina? I mean, maybe are there bears in some kind of bear in the Smokies?
There's not, and I'm just gonna go ahead and tell you they are the Runnin' Bulldogs. The Runnin' Bulldogs of Gardner-Webb University, which is a private Baptist university that is D1. It's D1. They play in the Big South Conference. So good on Mason Miller. There you go.
Do you know what annoyed me though? Is that AJ Preller right away when he was talking about it, he's like, oh, I wanted this guy, but he wanted to go over slot. He signed with them for slot in the third round. So, we drafted after the A's I saw in the third round. So if we would have got him, we would have got him instead of Gasser. I think it was Robert Gasser that we got in the second round that year. So, I don't know. It didn't seem like we had to go over slot to get him.
Yeah. So when he graduated to the Athletics Major Leagues, Eric Longenhagen graded him as the 38th overall prospect in baseball at the end of 2024, number 1 overall in the Athletics organization, 50 future value evaluation as a reliever, fastball, 80 grade. I mean, I don't see how else you can. Yeah, what else can you give him? Slider, 70 grade, changeup, 60 grade. And the command was a 45 present value, 50 future value, and the TLDR, too long didn't read, of Miller's prospect evaluation was his prospect stock was impacted by his injury history, which we will talk about, but he has premium stuff and will be an elite closer while healthy. I think that elite closer almost undersells it, John.
Although I'm not going to get into. I don't think we're getting into his prospect as a starting pitcher possibly. Maybe we will, but I will. If we are going to get into it, I will kind of seed that conversation by wondering about this 60 grade changeup that he throws 1.8% of the time. Because does Niebo like changeups? He does. Question going forward. Let's put that in the back of your head, everybody.
Interesting.
Interesting.
So just really briefly on that injury history. So after a May 8th start against the Kansas City Royals, the Miller was given elbow tightness diagnosis, and he was later diagnosed with a mild sprain of his UCL in his throwing elbow and promptly shut down. So that was, by the way, back in 2023. So this was when Miller was still being touted as a potential starter. And so in 2024, the Athletics announced that they were going to move Miller to being a reliever. And that was in an effort to maintain his health. And in the time since then, Miller has said that he will not go back to being a starter unless he gets a contract extension, which is, of course, the same thing that Garrett Crochet did, which he then achieved when he was traded to the Red Sox and got a contract extension, and is now that's actually worked out very well for both Garrett Crochet and the Red Sox. So, John, why don't you just break it down for us? Tell us about Miller, the pitcher, why is he so good, starter prospects in the future, etc.
All right. This is very simple. He's really good because he throws 104 miles an hour, up to 104 miles an hour with a good slider, and we're going to see that. Interestingly to me, he has a kind of similar location profile with his four-seam fastball as Nick Pivetta did before he came to the Padres, which Nick Pivetta hasn't changed that wildly, but he's changed it just enough to make him slightly more variable than he was. And in Mason, I'm on a first name basis with Mason. So in Miller's first start or first relief appearance for the Padres, he also was hitting more arm side fastballs, like arm side middle in, which he never does. And so I'm wondering if we're gonna change the locations around a little bit on him. He doesn't have the command that Pivetta has, but I do wonder because he's for the A's, he was pretty much all four seam fastball, above the zone, mostly down the middle, but above the zone, and then slider, glove side away, middle away. Those tunnel off each other well, which is what Pivetta kind of did before he came to the Padres. And then once Pivetta came to the Padres, he put his sweeper instead of a slider. Why did I just get a bunch of balloons? More low and away rather than middle away, and it's obviously worked very well. And he's also moved his fastball command around a little bit more, so I do wonder whether if you come up to the plate against Mason Miller and you pretty much know that he's going to give you a fastball up, that you just is this a strike? If it's, probably you just don't swing at it if it's, high at all, but then you're looking for it to be over the middle, and if it's over the middle, you swing. I do wonder whether Niebla is going to change things up a little bit. It seemed like there was only 10 pitches, I think, that he threw in the first appearance, so I don't know. I guess now is the best time to mess with it before you get to the playoffs, just to see if you can buy a few more strikes on the inside part to right-handers or away from lefties. But for the most part, he throws 104 and he has a nasty slider. If you don't mess with what's working currently as a reliever, then he's probably just going to keep doing that. Fastballs above the zone and then sliders that tunnel off of it. Like I said, he throws that changeup 1.8% of the time. I suppose if we were moving him back into the rotation, if that changeup continues to play well, which, Stuff Plus doesn't do changeups that well, but I would imagine a changeup that was originally grade 60 off of that, as a starter, probably closer to 100-mile-an-hour fastball would probably play well, especially to lefties. He'd probably be nasty. The question is whether he would be able to endure the violence on his arm over, so many pitches per appearance. He's good. He's really good. I bet we could make him even better with just a couple little tweaks if we wanted to. But he's got pretty good induced vertical, and he's got pretty good induced vertical for somebody that's averaging a fastball of 101.1 miles per hour. So he could get away with not having induced vertical, and he has pretty good, slightly above average induced vertical, even on that 101.1 mile per hour fastball. So if you get a fastball at the top of the zone against him, good luck unless you're like Vladimir Guerrero or somebody who can, the original, somebody who can just smack a fastball at incredible rates. He's good. That's really it. He's good. Do we transfer him into into a starting pitcher? We've had success obviously with that with quite a few players now. If you want to increase the total likelihood of his value, it's possibly worth getting into. And when you have him for as many years as we have him, even if you lose him to a single Cy Young, not Cy Young, a single, what do you call it when you cut the UCL?
What? The surgery?
What do you call it? The surgery for when you cut a UCL? Sorry, I lost
Tommy John?
Steam. Tommy John, yeah. If you get a single Tommy John surgery.
Dr. Fracoda. I was like, are you asking me what I think you're asking me?
we don't call.
You're in a surgery rotation right now.
I am currently in a surgery rotation. That's true. You don't want surgery from me. If he gets a single Tommy John, then it's probably still like you lose 1 year out of the 4 of value that you have. Cool. He's going to be valuable no matter what you do with him, and he has a higher likelihood of being incredibly valuable if you move him to the starting pitcher role. If you leave him in as a reliever, still very valuable.
Yeah, I mean, I really don't have too much to add to that. There's a little bit of hay made about, oh, well, he's not that good against lefties this year. A, it's a pretty small sample size, but B, also, I think that we can chalk that up to Sacramento, something that we're going to talk about a lot when we get to JP Sears. So before we do that, why don't we talk about you have it in our article as the implications of Mason Miller and the little component of game theory that you want to talk to us about.
Yeah, so this rolls into what I was talking with you about earlier in the podcast when we were saying, did you think that we were going to trade Suarez? So we didn't trade Suarez, and there's a Ben Clemens article that came out right after that basically said the Padres have used their 4 best relievers, the 4 horsemen, prior to this trade, in almost every single possible higher than average index spot. So every time that there's a high leverage spot, the 4 horsemen are in, which means that if you add a pitcher to it, then one of those 4 horsemen are basically pitching more often in a lower than average index spot, which means that you're not technically adding to the total value of like how much value you can pull out of a bullpen. And so that totally makes sense to me from an argument, especially during the regular season. However, during the playoffs, you could argue that the team that AJ Preller set up, the value of our team currently is based on our bullpen. Like that's the deck that we built. We built a team that is based on its bullpen capacity going to win games. And that means that especially in a 3-game series, if we only make the wild card, but also in a 5-game series in the second round, we have to use all of our 5 relievers almost every single game. At least, 3 or 4 out of 5 games. And the question is Mike Schilt going to use the roster that was built for him? Is he going to be able to pull Dylan Cease, Michael King, Yu Darvish, Nick Pivetta in the 4th inning if there's runners on base, or in the 5th inning before they even go into the 5th inning just because they're facing the 3rd time through the lineup for the first time? Is he going to be able to do that? Because that is going to be what's most successful. And so what I have listed here, I have it organized by xWOBA, but you can look at whatever stats you want. This is for the past 2 years, the Padres starters, so Yu Darvish, Nick Pivetta, Michael King, and Dylan Cease, plus the now 5 relief pitchers that we have that are the good ones. Their stats from the 4th inning on. So you pick if it's the 4th inning or if it's the 5th inning and you need 5 innings. Who of these pitchers are you going to make sure that you include for the rest of the game against the Dodgers in the playoffs? Right, it's an important game. Okay, and do you want me to try and guess who these people are? You can if you want, but you don't have to. You can just pick who you want. Oh, I'm just picking the 4th or 5th inning. You can do either. You can do both. One, the other. Well, I think part of it is what part of the lineup are you facing, who's on base, okay, et cetera, et cetera. So, I mean, like, you have a guy on there that I have to assume is Mason Miller with his 41.1% strikeout rate, listed at the top. So Mason Miller's pitching every game in a close game. Yeah. I would want him to face the top of the Dodgers lineup, probably whatever the final time that they're projected to come up in the game is. So if that's the 7th inning or the 8th inning or the 9th inning, it doesn't really matter to me. And then we've got the next highest person up, or there's 2 people tied with an xWOBA of 254. But I've got one of them below who has a higher strikeout rate, a slightly higher walk rate, but a sub 200 batting average and a sub 300 slugging percentage. So they'd probably be my second person up, followed by whoever's above them as the 3rd person.
I'm just trying to think. I mean, like from fourth inning, I mean, I would just kind of go in this descending order here that you have. There's really only like one person who there's two people who are really like big, like blinking red lights for me, which are the two bottom people who have xWOBAs above 300. So why don't you tell me who all these people are? Yeah, so this is great audio content, by the way.
The bottom. So I just wanted you to rank them because now the good audio content is going to happen. So the bottom two pitchers are Nick Pivetta and Dylan Cease, which means that if it's the fourth inning and we're facing the lineup through for the third time,
very good.
Are you going to bench Nick Pivetta and Dylan Cease? Game strategy would say yes, right?
Absolutely.
Is Mike Schilt going to do it?
No.
So this is so important about whether they're aligned on their strategy, because if we build a strategy that's a perfect strategy and we use it imperfectly, then we have an imperfect strategy, right? And so the question is are we going to up four in a clinching game in the ALCS or NLCS? Are we going to pitch Mike Clevenger in the first inning and then Manaea afterwards? Like we did with Bowmel. Hopefully, if it's the fifth inning and there's even one hitter on base or the top of the lineup's coming up or it's any kind of important situation, we're pulling Nick Pivetta and Dylan Cease for sure, right? Then you can get into a question mark. I feel like Darvish is actually ahead of Jason Adam and Robert Suarez. Interestingly, Darvish gets better as the game goes on. So just like in the playoffs last year against the Dodgers, leaving him in tended to be a valuable thing to do. And so he's not built up. So we'll see if he gets built up for the playoffs and this is even a question. But if he is built up and he's playing well, there's at least a question mark about whether you pull Darvish in the fourth or fifth inning. And then Michael King, also a question mark because he's kind of similar to Robert Suarez in total efficacy the past couple of years. So you can make a debate to leave Michael King in for the fourth or fifth. But for the most part, it's pretty much just, the players that you ranked in order were Mason Miller, then Jeremiah Estrada, who you would then put in the second highest leverage, then Morehone, and then Yu Darvish, like I said, and then Jason Adam, and then Robert Suarez. So basically, besides Yu Darvish, you're just using the five horsemen from probably the fourth inning on, and just trying to go, get an inning and a third from each of them, and just running out the bullpen. So the question is it a good strategy? I think it depends on whether we implement the strategy. If we do implement the strategy, I would argue that it would be a great strategy for the playoffs.
Yeah. Also just goes to show, like, my trust level in the starting rotation is probably Michael King, Nick Pivetta, and then Yu Darvish, and then Dylan Cease in the playoffs. Mm-hmm. Like, my trust level for Dylan Cease is so low, man. It's just... I just think it's just, and you'll hear the same thing for Craig and Chris, but I think that there's just something about being there. Like the three of us were there in Game 4 last year at the NLDS, and it was just, I know he was on short rest, and I know there was a lot of questions. He wasn't really set up for success, but something is just seared into our brains that we can't undo.
Dude,
okay.
Dylan Cease this year so far, his first time through the order ERA is 2.94. What do you think his second time through the order is? 2.94.
I'm going to go like 5.75.
6.05, and then it goes up to
close.
6.33 after that. So, if you're going to use Dylan Cease, which I think we basically have to use Dylan Cease. If you're going to use Dylan Cease in the playoffs, then you're going to have a criminally short leash on him with this current bullpen. That's just how you have to do it. That's just how you have to do it.
I would love to see him piggybacked with JP Sears in the playoffs, which is my segment.
Me about it,
Transition Man. So, the reason for that being, of course, that also you got a hard throwing righty against a somewhat soft tossing lefty. But okay, JP Sears, for folks who do not know, he is 29 years old. He was drafted in 2017 in the 11th round by the Seattle Mariners. But his time in the Mariners organization was somewhat brief. He ended up going to the Yankee system, which this is just a side note, but I wanted to just point out for folks, we have a lot of former Yankees organization pitchers with the Padres now. We've got JP Sears, we've got Randy Vasquez, we've got Michael King, we've got Johnny Brito, we've got Nestor Cortez. So I don't know. There's something interesting there. Obviously, the Yankees are a pretty well regarded pitching organization, and certainly now with Matt Blake as their pitching coach, they've been doing great things. But I'm just curious if that's something that Preller, if it's coincidence, or if Preller sort of recognizes that, like, oh, they do know how to scout pitching, and there's something to be gained from that. But anyway, he ends up on the Yankees, and he gets traded to the Oakland Athletics, and comes over in the 2022 season. And basically from the time that he was with the A's, he's been good to mid to maybe not that great, depending on what numbers you're looking at. He is an extreme fly ball pitcher. His first year with the Athletics, his first full season, he had a FIP over 5, largely because he was getting shelled and wasn't striking out as many guys. 2024, that number just creeps down to 4.71. And so far this season with the A's, he has a FIP, again, that's just nearing 4.96 right now. But the good news for Padres folks is that he's an innings eater. 172 innings in 2023, 180 innings in 2024, and he's already thrown 111 innings so far for the Athletics this season. John, why don't you get into a little bit more of the nitty-gritty with JP, and then I'll kind of talk about his fly ball profile.
All right, so obviously he's been fine. JP Sears is the definition of fine. His xERA this year is the 43rd percentile, which would be classified as fine. The thing that makes him interesting is, one, he has a weird delivery, right, with a weird angle, and you discussed before when we were talking about like the fastball speed doesn't really matter when you're throwing it at different angles, or you can't just like trick somebody. Like, so Kyle Hart, you were low on at the start of the season because, despite the fact that he had a strange angle, he just didn't throw hard enough to get by major league hitters. And so I think that a lot of what happens with JP Sears is, can he throw, literally this is what it comes down to for me, can he throw fast enough to be a major league quality starting pitcher? And I don't know what the answer to that is. And so I dug into it a little bit, and we'll talk about it probably in a little bit, but his scouting report before he got to the majors said that he sits 93 and his fastball lives off the angle at the top of the zone. So kind of like an extremely, extremely poor version of Josh Hader, where he has the weird angle and he can hit it at the top of the zone, but Sears throws it about 6 miles an hour less. But he also has a swing and miss slider that has great back foot angle against righties. He actually mentioned this later on in this article that I posted, but Longenhagen said that he alters his release somewhat when throwing the slider, but hitters haven't been able to pick that up so far. And he actually said that himself. He says that he knows that he drops down a lot with his slider in particular, and so it's possible that some hitters can pick that up. I don't know how easy or hard that is because I've never done it. But he drops his angle a little bit, and then what he referenced also in the article was that he knows he's like one of those nerdy guys, so he'll probably get along well with Michael King and with Joe Musgrove, but he knew that in order to make his breaking pitches and his off-speed pitches better, he actually had to make the analytics behind his four-seam worse. Otherwise, it was too different from his off-speed pitches, and you would be able to pick up on these things even easier. And so he knows that he analytically made his four-seamer worse in exchange for making his breaking pitches better. So I don't know. That's interesting to me. It's interesting to me that he knows that what he wants to do is increase fastball velocity. He gave it a 0.3 to 0.4 bump this year. I'm just going to get into what I think about that. So when I took out the numbers of when he throws a fastball that's 93 miles an hour or more, or 92 miles an hour or less. And that's this year and last year. Just so you know, his average fastball velocity is 92.2. So when he is just above his average, what his numbers are, and when he's just below his average. When he's 93 or higher on his four-seam fastball, that fastball result had a WOBA and an xWOBA in the 290s, both of them. So 292 WOBA, 297 xWOBA. When it's 92 or less, his WOBA was 392 and xWOBA was 374. So we're talking about 100 points difference basically when he's throwing it hard enough to be at 93 or more versus when he drops down a little bit. And so that kind of bears out to me in his numbers first time through, second time through, and third time through the order. So in that first time through the order, when he's able to kind of ramp it up a little bit, this year his ERA is 3.08. For his whole career, it's 3.47. Obviously, those are good numbers. Those are numbers that you will take all the time. This year, his second time through is 5.96. For his career, it's 4.90. Suddenly, you're talking more of a third or fifth starter or so. And then third time through, 7.88 this year and 5.50 for his career. So the question is, for me, for JP Sears, one, can he throw hard enough? Like, that's just it. Can he throw 93 miles an hour or more and then have his nasty sweeper off of it? Because he does have a good sweeper. It generates whiffs at a 26.4% rate. The xWOBA against it is 236 so far this year. It's a good sweeper, but he can't just live on sweepers in the zone all the time. He has to be able to command his fastball and hard enough for hitters not to just be able to key in on it.
Yeah, I mean, it's sort of reminiscent of when you broke down the Waldron knuckleball sort of velocity threshold, and you're like, okay, if Matt Waldron just throws his knuckleball at least 78 miles per hour, like, he's basically a completely different pitcher. And, in the limited action we saw Matt Waldron this year, he was not throwing it that hard. He was throwing it closer to 76, 77. We saw that difference. So, super intriguing for JP Sears because to me, there was one obvious comparison and play that stuck out to me. And I talked about it on the main show, but I'm going to go much more in depth here, which is it reminded me of the Nick Pivetta signing. And the reasoning, this is not super in-depth analysis, but you just look at these guys' profiles. They're both extreme fly ball pitchers. JP Sears had a fly ball rate so far this season. Gosh, where do I have it? I have it down here. I don't have it down here. I only have his home stats. I'm just going to vamp while I pull it up. JP Sears is a fly ball pitcher. That's all you need to know.
Extreme fly ball pitcher.
Extreme fly ball pitcher. So here we go. 52.9% fly ball rate so far, which is the highest of his career. He is a career 49.3% fly ball pitcher. And just for reference, so you guys can get a sense of what league average is, according to StatCast, the league average fly ball rate is 24%. So he's more than double league average in terms of fly balls. And let's talk about why JP Sears has been mid so far. Well, there's a lot of variance that happens when a ball goes in the air. There's a lot of environmental factors that go into it. And StatCast, which is for a long time had park factors up there. It's something we talk about all the time. Why is Coors Field a hitter's park? Why is San Francisco typically a pitcher's park? Et cetera, et cetera. And we always have kind of talked about elevation and temperature and yada, yada, yada. Well, they've added recently a variable extra distance tab in terms of parks. So you can literally see how much further fly balls fly in certain ballparks, and they rate it based off of temperature, elevation, environmental factors, whether or not you're playing under a roof. Super, super cool data. And so I want to start by talking about Nick Pivetta, because Nick Pivetta is another extreme fly ball pitcher. And Nick Pivetta, when he originally was playing for the Philadelphia Phillies, was not very good. He had an ERA around 5. He was tended to be clobbered a lot. And if you look on the variable extra distance chart, you'll see that right now on average, fly balls in Philadelphia are flying 5.8 feet further than they are in Boston. And when Nick Pivetta went to Boston, you can see that his home runs per 9 rate at home went down about 0.3. So his career home run per 9 rate at home is 1.79 in Philadelphia, 1.48 in Boston. And since he's come to San Diego, I know it's only one season of sample size, but he has a 0.7 home run per 9 rate at home with the San Diego Padres. And what's so curious about this is that his fly ball rate over the course of his career has actually gone up with each successive location. So in Philadelphia, he had a fly ball rate at home of 36.7% and a home run to fly ball percentage of 19.5%. So basically, 1 in every 5 fly ball that Nick Pivetta was allowing in Philadelphia was going over the fence for a home run. In Boston, he gave up 40.5% fly ball rate at home. That home run to fly ball percentage went down to 15%. And in San Diego, he has the highest fly ball rate at home of his career, 48.3%. Sounds an awful lot like JP Sears' career number. And his home run to fly ball percentage has fallen to 7.1%. Now, when you look to JP Sears has played in 2 ballparks in his career. He's both of them on the Athletics. He played at the Oakland Coliseum, which is another ballpark that is close to a natural California harbor right around sea level, and so therefore has comparable park factor elements to Petco Park. Whereas when JP Sears moved to Sacramento, he was playing in a literal minor league ballpark with shorter dimensions. The temperature in the summer tends to hover around 100 degrees every day. And there are other elements like wind and humidity, the prevailing winds going from west to east, which are going to blow the ball over the fence. Humidity tends to be a little bit higher in Northern California than it does down here in Southern California. So all of that adds up to the variable extra distance on fly balls in Sacramento was 11.7 feet. And when you compare that to San Diego, which is currently this year playing at a negative 3.9 extra feet, that is a swing of 15.6 feet on fly balls that JP Sears is going to experience just moving from Sacramento down to San Diego. And if you look at JP Sears' career home run per 9 rates at home, in Oakland, it was 1.58. And in Sacramento, again, small sample size, but he's at 2.6. 2.6 home runs per 9 at home for JP Sears in Sacramento this season. And, I mean, it's just a nightmare to play an extreme fly ball pitcher in Sacramento. It's death to his career. So you look at JP Sears' numbers, his fly ball rate at home in Oakland was 46.2%, again, very comparable to Nick Pivetta. And his home run to fly ball ratio was 12.2%, which is actually very close to league average. League average tends to hover around 11 or 12%. In Sacramento, he had a 55.9% fly ball rate, and he had a home run to fly ball rate of 17.5%. Again, sounds very similar to what Nick Pivetta's was in Philadelphia. So I think that Ruben Niebla was like, just put this guy down here. And all of a sudden, those home runs that were flying out of the ballpark in Sacramento are dying on the warning track in San Diego, as we've seen time and time again. And all of a sudden, what became a very unreliable pitcher in Sacramento is someone who is, zapping power. And by having, sluggers get underneath the ball in San Diego and having balls die harmlessly in which, by the way, a very good defensive outfield now with Tatis, Merrill. Yeah.
Let me say that too. So this is before Laureano. OAA, we were 4th in the league in outfield defense. Athletics were 14th. DRS, if you're a DRS fan, we're 4th in the league, and the Athletics were... 24th. And so for both of those, obviously we're a much better defense than the Athletics are in the outfield, and now we're adding Laureano, who should make us even better, one would think. So the question is, 1, how much does Petco help? 2, how much does the defense help? 3, how much does Niebla's influence and possibly using him in shorter stints because we have a better bullpen, or at least being able to pull him at times when he's in danger because we have a better bullpen, how much do all of those factors influence his success?
Yeah. So, look, I don't think that JP Sears has Nick Pivetta's ceiling. Nick Pivetta has far better stuff than JP Sears. Yes. But I am very excited by the idea that JP Sears is going to work with Ruben Niebla and with Nick Pivetta as again, they're throwing from opposite arms. Like, they're not super close in stuff by any means. But I do think, hey, extreme fly ball pitcher to another. Here's what I notice about playing in this city and in this ballpark. Could JP Sears be a reliable 4-starter for the team? I don't see why not. And that, like, again, for 3.5 years of control, I'm not trying to polish the turd of giving away Leo De Vries if he turns into a franchise guy. But you've got the best reliever for 4 seasons, and you've got a really solid back-end starter. Like, that's going to provide a lot of value for the Padres down the line.
Yeah, especially when we traded so many back-end starters in this trade deadline that it's like you needed a JP Sears, and there's some ceiling here for him being an actually good player. I think there's a lot of things that you could like. He's successful when he's throwing hard enough. He's got a good sweeper. He is going to a better park, better defense. First time through, he's very good. So how do we harness all of these qualities and make him into a successful pitcher? I think that the likelihood of that happening pretty high, actually.
Pretty high. So very interesting stuff here. John, before we start moving on to any of these other trades, any final thoughts on this Miller, Sears, De Vries?
Yeah, so I want to know your overall opinion in the question that I brought up earlier, which was, we got Mason Miller, we got JP Sears. That's what the value exchange that we got for our prospect capital in this trade. Are you okay with that? Would you have preferred an outfielder, say, that was controllable? If it was available. I don't know that it was available, but if it was.
It's so hard because you have to imagine that they made this trade knowing that they were close on Laureano and O'Hearn. Because, again, De Vries seemed to be the biggest trade chip that AJ was willing to part with, especially because I think Salas's value is basically at an all-time low right now, so it didn't make a lot of sense to trade Ethan Salas. I was really surprised, and at first I was kind of, the logically I was like, I don't really get it. Like, the team already has the best bullpen. Like, why are you going to expend your biggest trade chip to strengthen something that doesn't necessarily need to be strengthened? I see this move much more for 2027 and 2028 than I do for 2025. I think it makes the 2025 team better, don't get me wrong, but like now you have controllable starting pitching for and you're the best reliever in baseball. And I also think, it is worth saying, if you trade for Mason Miller, the Dodgers can't trade for him. Which I do think is in a weird little bit of game theory sort of makes sense. I don't know that there's another outfielder that was available outside of Jarren Duran who I would have been comfortable giving up Leo De Vries for, and it doesn't seem like he was available. So I guess that's my answer. Would I have been happy?
Happier if that was the return.
Probably. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. And then the follow-up question is, do you think that the game theory is going to align with AJ Preller and Schilt for the playoffs? Or are you going to be mad because we're not pulling starters quick enough?
Well, again, recency bias, but they left Randy Vasquez into a game last night far too long. And they also are playing...
Playoffs are a different game.
Playoffs are a different game. I unfortunately... I think Dylan Cease is the kryptonite to all of this because I think he has too much respect in the clubhouse for them to have the short leash on with him, even though they should. I think for basically any other pitcher, like even to a certain extent, Darvish, like even though the numbers say that like he works great into the games, obviously he's been battling injury. He seems like he's a little bit of a different pitcher this season. But I think like given his age and like his injury this year, like they'd be willing to have a shorter leash on. I just have trouble thinking that they're going to go one time through the order with Dylan Cease. Like I think they'll only pull him if, he's given up 2 runs in the 4th inning and he's got 2 runners on base with an out left and it's too late already. You know what I mean? And you're like, well, now we'll make the move, Do you think that they'll do it?
I don't know. I would love to see them do that, but I haven't thus far seen. I mean, for example, last year in the playoffs, we still had a good bullpen last year, and when the top of the lineup came up and there were runners on base in a critically important game 4, we put Brian Hoeing into the game rather than one of our higher leverage pitchers, which is like, obviously we should have put in a higher leverage pitcher in that situation. So, I don't know. It feels like there's a little bit of inability for. I mean, the players seem to love Schilt, but it seems like there's a little bit of an inability for him to make like a crazy move for the success of the team. And so I do wonder whether we get to the end of Game 5 and are. I mean, if you are in a 3-game series or a 5-game series, what should happen the same way as at the end of a mile run, you should be exhausted and have expended all of your energy. Our bullpen should be heavily used. There should not be people who haven't pitched in 2 or 3 games. And last year that didn't happen. I wonder whether this year it would happen again. Because that's our talent as a team is bullpen. That's like our biggest thing. That's the thing that we need to express in the playoffs in order to be successful. And so when you get to the end of a series, you better be like, shit, did we almost use the bullpen too much? Not, are we saving a couple guys for Game 1 of next series?
Yeah. Well, I think that's a good note to end it on, John. So thanks for kicking it with us for this coverage of the very first trade of the trade deadline. Already over an hour in. So we're going to be back to you. Probably going to release these, day or days apart. But we'll come back to you next with the Laureano and O'Hearn trade coverage. And then for episode 3, we'll talk about the Fermin trade and sort of pick up the pieces on some of the other smaller moves that were made. But hang with us because we'll be back soon with some more trade coverage. For John Percoda, I'm Raphie Cantor. We'll see you next time.